Welcome to today's video conference, one in a series Ethnic Media Services has hosted for some time on the 2020 census. I'm Sandy Close, Director of EMS, and I'll be the moderator for today's conference. A special thanks to the California Complete Count Committee, Census 2020, for their support of our work in promoting the census. Today, our focus is on San Mateo, how it came to lead California counties in census self-response rates, what lessons it can share, where it still faces undercounts. We are in momentous times with the pandemic, the economic downturn it's caused, and a nationwide movement for racial justice commanding our attention. We also know the future well-being of our families, our children, our communities, our state rests on an accurate census count. Our 7 speakers today have long experience working with undercounted communities. Each will speak for 5 minutes, and after each speaker, we will reserve 3 minutes for your questions. We will share your comments with the speakers afterwards, just in case we don't get to all of them. We will also send a video of the conference to all participants later today, and in 2 weeks, we will share some of the coverage today's conference generated. Jessica Martin will instruct you on how to submit questions during the conference in the chat box. Jessica.
Hi, welcome everyone. So in order to use the chat box, if you're joining by laptop, it'll be a bottom bar of icons on your screen, and you want to check the little box that says chat. Use that, and please, when you type in your questions for the speakers, please chat with everyone so that you guys don't ask the same questions, or you can build on each other's questions. If you are joining us by a cell phone, there should be 3 dots in the right-hand corner. You want to click that, and the chat function will be there. If you are dialing in, you will have to submit your questions via email, because the chat function doesn't work if you're just dialing in, and you can email one of the contacts on the invite, and I will pass it back to Sandy.
Terrific. So now we begin. Leading off today's panel is Megan Gosh, Census Management Analyst for the San Mateo County Office of Community Affairs. And Ms. Gosh will share demographic data and how the county used data to geo-target their outreach efforts. Megan, thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to discuss Census 2020 challenges, outreach efforts, and the strategies we have employed to help San Mateo County maintain the highest self-response rate of any county in California. As she mentioned, my name is Megan Gosh, and I began working with the County of San Mateo back in January of 2018. So I'm going to start our story with how we began preparing for the 2020 census, knowing that there are going to be many challenges that we'd have to overcome. California is considered the hardest to count state in the entire nation. 72% of Californians belong to one or more hard to count or hard to reach groups, which traditionally includes non-citizens, renters, residents with limited English proficiency, and children under 5. In San Mateo County, there are census tracts that include these hard to reach populations in 13 out of 20 cities, as well as large unincorporated areas, and they're dispersed all over the county. So one of the significant challenges that we faced was the lack of affordable housing. And due to these skyrocketing housing costs, only 14% of households can afford a home. And the average rent of a studio apartment is $2,400. Because of this lack of affordable housing opportunities, many residents are living in non-traditional housing units. These include things such as converted garages, basements, sheds, or recreational vehicles that are parked on properties. These units often do not have an official U.S. Post Office address and therefore would not be included in the Census Bureau's master address file, and they would not receive a census questionnaire. So our first task was to review the Bureau's existing file in a process called LUCA, which is the Local Update of Census Addresses. It's the only opportunity a government has to review and update the Census Bureau's master address file. Using demographic information And working really closely with city planners and our local community-based organizations, we identified the areas around the county that were most likely to include high concentrations of these non-traditional housing units. And in partnership with our CBOs, we canvassed these areas to record the non-traditional housing units so that we could include it in the Census Bureau's master address file. We signed a confidentiality agreement with the Census Bureau and so did not share any of this information with any city or county government. And actually, I was the only one who had access to the data. Through this process, we identified almost 2,000 units around the county. So even if conservatively we say 2 people per unit, that would equate to a potential loss of $4 million a year for 10 years of federal funding if those individuals were not counted. So in addition to historically hard to count or reach populations, this decennial census came with other challenges, including the fact that the 2020 census was moving primarily online. And that means that 88% of our county received an invitation to participate online, which raises concerns about data privacy, security, digital access, and literacy. And there's a fear and lack of trust in the federal government and concerns about this data privacy, as well as the attempt to add the citizenship question. Although unsuccessful, it caused significant anxiety among our immigrant communities. It was estimated that there would only be a 60% self-response rate in the 2020 census, which would mean potentially a loss of billions of dollars of federal funds to California. We knew as county employees, we're not going to be able to convince all residents to participate in the census. The populations who are the hardest to reach would need trusted messengers from their own communities to share this information. We needed strong partnerships with our community-based organizations as well as volunteers to help us reach all of our residents. We are thankful for the support of our County Board of Supervisors and the County Manager, and we were able to allocate almost $1.3 million through a series of requests for proposals. For those to be on the ground trusted messengers, we needed to assure a complete and accurate count of all residents. Using demographic, geography, and organizational coverage information, we divided the county into 8 regions and then selected organizations in each of those regions to be part of a community action team. We have continually utilized census data, plus the local knowledge of our partners, to assist in developing our outreach strategies. Our goal, in addition to receiving a complete and accurate count, was to design a structure that would allow for continued civic engagement across all levels. We have census ambassador volunteers who will continue to be resources and civic leaders in their communities, and we've also increased the capacity for outreach and organizing for our grassroots local community leaders. Thrive, the Alliance for Nonprofits, has been instrumental in coordinating activities across the county by working with each of our action teams. We hold regional meetings once a month, and during these meetings, we drill down to the census tract and we look at what outreach efforts are successful, what are not successful, what are the messages that are resonating with their local communities. And then we share these ideas and strategies across other regions as well. And it's working. As of June 28th, San Mateo County, for the 10th week in a row, is leading the state in self-response rates. We are currently at 72.8. The state is at 62.9, and the nation is at 61.8. We're only 0.4% behind our final 2010 self-response rate. And what a self-response rate means if you turn in your census questionnaire either by phone, by mail, or online. Starting August 11th, the Census Bureau will be going door to door as part of the non-response follow-up, where they're asking you to fill out your forms. So one really cool thing about having the ability to respond online is we have access to these daily updates of response rates. And we can see how many of people who responded have done so online versus mailing or calling in. And we're mapping and analyzing all this information at a census tract level. And doing this has shown us some really interesting things. For example, even though we know East Palo Alto has access to broadband, their internet response rates are lower than we would have expected. And that tells us that there's other things that are going on in these areas, like folks aren't comfortable using the internet, or they don't have trust providing their information online. We can use this information to pivot our outreach strategies accordingly. I won't go into too much detail about that because I want our partners to be able to talk about what they're doing, but having the ability to analyze these daily results and looking at demographic and geographic information has been instrumental in our outreach and success countywide.
Thank you so much for that tremendous overview. Let's see if we have questions in our chat box. And my eyes are having a hard time with the small font on the chat box. but I think, do we have a question from Han Lee of the World Journal? Can we unmute Han Lee? Okay, he may have left the line just for a moment. Let me ask Kylie, great, from Bay City News. Kylie?
Yeah, hi. I know you have to speak fast. You don't have a lot of time, but could you repeat the self-response rates that you just mentioned?
Absolutely. So the County of San Mateo is currently at 72.8%. And the state is at 62.9%, and the nation is at 61.8%.
Sorry, I have a question, and that is compared to 2010, what would you say the biggest difference is for San Mateo, the biggest challenge compared to where you were in 2010?
Well, we can't do an absolute time comparison since this census is different as it's online. So in 2010, our final self-response rate was 73.2. So we're 0.4% behind that. And, you know, given the challenges that we've faced this year, I am so pleased and thankful for all the work that everyone is doing, because there was the online challenge, there was a lack of trust, and then we had the whole pandemic occur, which really threw a wrench in all of our outreach activities. And so we've had to dynamically pivot and develop new strategies, new techniques, how to engage individuals that may need assistance with the internet. And so all of our partners have been working really diligently and coming up with innovative ideas, and I'll let them speak to that. But we had a fairly high response rate in 2010, so we're very pleased that we are going to surpass that in 2020.
Okay, thank you. We have one question. We have a number of questions, but we have time for just one more for you from Pilar Marrero. Can we unmute Pilar?
Hi everyone. I was curious if you had a breakdown of response rates in San Mateo for ethnic communities, and also I'm going to tag a second question. What did you do that other counties or less successful places did not do in order to get that high response?
So for the first question, response rates are reported at a census tract level. So we can't really identify, it's not individual, it's not by block group. It's really a larger kind of summary of responses. We can look at each census tract and look at the demographics of it, but we can't tell who has responded because that's confidential information. So I can't really provide that. What we have done that other areas have not, I'd like to think it's our incredible partnerships we have with our community-based organizations and our volunteers around the county. We're very, we work together really well. I think there's a lot of trust. We've engaged well with our communities and we listen. And so if someone tells us that a message that I have developed is not going to resonate with a community in Pescadero, then we're like, okay, what do you recommend? What is going to work? Because I don't know. And we really rely on our trusted messengers and all of our community partners to help us engage with our residents and make messages and communications that will speak to people. And I think that has been one of our greatest successes.
Thank you so much. We'll be back to you with the final Q&A period. Our next speaker is Melissa Vergara, who also works with the County of San Mateo as a census specialist. Melissa, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And I see a lot of familiar faces and names here today, so hello everybody. Like Sandy said, my name is Melissa and I'm a management fellow and community outreach specialist for the San Mateo County Office of Community Affairs. As Megan was saying, you know, we are ecstatic to be #1 in the state of California. But we still have a lot of work to do. The county is ahead in certain places such as Hillsborough, Belmont, and San Carlos, which is actually leading at 81.4%. self-response rate. But there are areas that still need to respond. Areas that are lower include Pescadero and East Palo Alto, which is almost 25% lower at 57.4%. So in order to reach these low response rate census tracts, the county has used hyper-localized messaging and outreach. Along the coast, we did a targeted mailing and placed ads and articles in local papers and online publications. We also created radio station ads and have been very active engaging the community through social media. In Daly City, we received feedback that renters were hesitant to take the census, so we created a targeted door hanger which speaks specifically to the confidentiality laws of the census. Additionally, some of our partners informed us that these specific apartment buildings had a large Arabic-speaking population, which we didn't know because it wasn't reflected in the demographic data. So we were actually able to change the door hanger to include Arabic, along with 4 other languages. In East Palo Alto and North Fair Oaks, we are doing direct digital media targeting by zip codes, and we have worked with local trusted community members to film census videos. We put ads up on bus shelters and billboards and organized a faith-based census meeting to provide outreach ideas and strategies for local congregations. In East Palo Alto, our census partners have been very engaged, and most recently, Nuestra Casa organized a car caravan, which traveled to the lowest census tracts in the area. 6 out of the county's 10 lowest response rate tracts are located in East Palo Alto, and we have been working very hard with our partners to help raise awareness and education about the impacts of participating or not participating in the census. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, which I think we are all dealing with, the U.S. Census Bureau has extended the deadline for the census until October 31st. This extension presents both challenges and opportunities for San Mateo County, which has relied on local community organizations to promote census engagement through local in-person outreach, physical and social media advertising, and events. Originally, our partners had all scheduled in-person census events or assistance centers to help people complete their forms. Due to the pandemic, these events could no longer occur. I won't go into detail about how outreach has pivoted because of this, and I'll let our partners talk about their own effort. But the Bureau's extension is positive because it allows more time for communities to respond. We are excited that several groups are going to continue their census outreach. As we will hear from our census partners here today, we can't do it without them. They are our trusted messengers in the community. Given where we are now, I expect we will surpass our 2010 self-response rate of 73.2%, but it's important to keep in mind we have an election coming up, we're in the middle of an economic downturn, and we're still in the midst of a pandemic. The future is very uncertain, but what is certain is that we're going to need this funding for the next 10 years, especially after this pandemic. Our communities need equitable resources, and we're not going to get another chance to do this over because it only happens every 10 years. So I'm really happy to have everyone here today because we need everyone's help to make sure everyone gets counted.
Thank you so much. We have a number of questions, some of which are for the first speaker, some of which for you. I want to get to at least 2 of them. Jean Ho asks an important question from News for Chinese. Jean, we've unmuted you.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering because is there any kind of a data or correlation between why San Mateo County is doing so well? Is it because like the general education level and income level are higher in San Mateo County? Is it because like the residents in San Mateo County, they generally have a higher income level and educational level? Is that part of the reason why it's contributing to the fact that there is higher self-response rate?
Well, I think,
yeah.
Thank you, Jean. I think part of it, because we do see other counties like Marin County as well, who is not doing as well as us. So some other counties, you know, like Los Angeles, you can see there's a correlate. There is high education levels as well, but they're not necessarily doing as well. I think that might play a part of it, but I think a big part of it is that we really had this model when we were looking at how we were going to engage our community in outreach. We're using trusted messenger model, And we're really making sure we put a lot of that money we got from the Board of Supervisors and from the state back into the community, so we can make sure that each community had an organization doing work and doing outreach. So it wasn't just the county doing outreach throughout the whole San Mateo County. We have all these census partners also helping us. So I think that's a big motivating factor on why we're doing so well.
Thank you. One final question, I think that is you've sort of answered, from Henrietta Burrows.
Yes, thanks, Sandy. Melissa, you said that there are positive aspects and negative aspects with extending the deadline for the census. You mentioned, I think, the positive aspects. What are any of the negative aspects?
Hi, Henrietta. Thanks for asking. Well, I think just dealing with how we're going to sustain for the next 3 months has been a challenge, because not all of our census partners necessarily have the capacity or the staff to continue going until October. And some, of the other CBOs who were funded to do outreach are not going to have the budget to be able to continue working. And, like San Mateo County, there's also a budgeting issue as well on continuing that work for the next 3 months. So in combination with that, and just collaborating with the people who are still going to stay on board, I think that's been a challenge for us. But what I'm trying to look for is more of the positive, which is, well, now we have time to continue and reach those people who may have not responded because of the pandemic. So many of our outreach efforts were put on hold. Everyone had an event that was canceled, canvassing, tabling events. We really had to put a hold on all of that. So despite the challenges, I'm hopeful that because there has been an extension, we'll be able to overcome those challenges and really try to get everyone that wasn't counted by October.
Okay, thank you. That's all the time we have for questions for you right now. Our next speaker is Lisa Keeler, who is the Executive Director of the Bay Area Community Health Advisory Council, and will speak particularly about the challenge of reaching hard-to-count communities in East Palo Alto, African Americans, and other communities. Ms. Keeler.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sandy, for this opportunity to participate on this panel. As was mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Bay Area Community Health Advisory Council. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And this is really a grassroots community health based organization. And it was started 25 years ago by some African Americans who, in San Mateo, that were really concerned about the health disparities in diverse communities. We were approached by actually the San Mateo County Health Leadership to apply for a census grant focused on African Americans, and after further investigation, we wanted to specifically address areas where there are a large number of African Americans, but in specifically the city of San Mateo, an area called North Central San Mateo, which not only has sort of the genesis of this organization that was started, focused on African Americans, but is a very diverse community with a Latino, Pacific Islander, and Japanese community. And so we felt one of the successes of this organization is that we collaborate with a number of different organizations, faith-based organizations, civic organizations, academic research, et cetera. And so we reached out to Pastor Bussey at St. James AME Zion Church, which is located in the heart of North Central San Mateo. And she is considered a trusted, not only faith-based leader, but a community-based leader. And as we started organizing and getting our strategies together around how we're going to do this outreach, we had a kickoff event exactly 4 months ago tomorrow. And we had a panel of community leaders talk about the importance of the census. And I would like to give some credit to San Mateo City Council person, Amo Lee, who in the course of the conversation talked about how the word being counted is a trigger for diverse communities. And it's often seen as a negative trigger. And I think she really set the stage for us actually claiming what has been a negative connotation about being counted, and really owning and acknowledging the historical racism and bias in that word, and for us to reclaim it as power, that we do want to be counted because we have helped build this country. And when she did that, I kind of went back into the history books and looked at the genesis of the census was to discount African Americans. We were not considered full individuals. We were considered 3/5 of a person if you were a slave. So by design, there was embedded racism and bias in the census system to start with. So it is not a surprise that those features have been passed on through generations and generations. Also to the point where when systems like the census and other governmental systems have come to African Americans seeking help and support, we often don't get the benefit of those efforts. So those dollars that eventually get to us, or the representation that is due to those communities, is often not yielded. So I think first and foremost, for us to claim and acknowledge that pain and anxiety around engaging with governmental systems to move things ahead. From there, we were able to work with a number of other organizations, have various forums, Zoom meetings. We, as was mentioned, we had a very robust schedule of outreach activities that we were unable to do because of COVID-19. And so we had to get creative on how we would do those things. So we kind of went in partnership with the county. And I want to give kudos to Megan for engaging us with the phone banking system. And so we have tried to leverage that as much as we can in those communities that we're looking at in terms of educating folks about the census, acknowledging that the census has not always been fair, but that we were going to take the word being counted and really empower our community to participate. And so I think with the phone banking, with getting messaging out to our other trusted leaders and community partners has been effective. We have also talked about doing some pop-up quality assistance centers. We are having one at St. James on July 10th, along with providing toiletries to the members in that community. We are looking to leverage what other, like food drives, et cetera, where people are already going in a safe manner to get the word out about the census. I think the Black Lives Matter and the subsequent protesting has really galvanized various communities that it is time for us to stand up and to be counted and to be recognized, that we are part of the system, that we can help change the system, that we are part of an ecosystem, and that when part of our system is hurting or not being acknowledged or recognized, it impacts all of us.
Great.
So
I'm gonna hold you there
sure.
just to ask for questions.
Sure.
I have one very quick question myself. How successful do you think the outreach has been for African Americans? Is there any indicators that show that there's a higher response rate than, say, you expected at this point, or compared to 2010?
Well, I think there's a lot more conversation happening around it. NAACP, we have various organizations. I think the Census, U.S. Census Bureau has done an excellent job of doing some outreach, seeing some advertisements and videos that actually show us and give that message about how important it is for us to participate. I think the proof will be in the pudding when we see the numbers. But just from our perspective, we're seeing that there is at least increased engagement around the census. Now, how that translates into people actually filling it out, and hopefully we'll see that in the numbers, but at least people having those conversations and acknowledging that the census has not been kind to communities of color, and that we have an opportunity to actually change that.
Right. Because of interests of time, I'm going to summarize one question from a number of speakers, which is, have there been protests for Black Lives Matter and racial justice that have afforded an opportunity to get people to fill out the census?
Yes, there have been some local Black Lives Matter protesting in San Mateo, East Palo Alto, and other areas. As we know, we've seen them all on the television. I know that I personally try to mention the census every time we do any type of programming, regardless if it's census related or not. I always try to end, or at least have part of my messaging being that this is an opportunity, if you want to make a difference, is to participate in the census.
Well, this has been terrific. Thank you for our first speakers for sticking so tightly to the time frame. It's hard to do it because all of you are passionate about this subject. Our next speaker is Nina Lee, who also comes to us as a specialist, community outreach specialist for the San Mateo County Office of Community Affairs. And Ms. Lee will speak about outreach to Asian Americans.
Thank you for having me, Sandy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nina. I'm a Community Outreach Coordinator with San Mateo County Office of Community Affairs. I have been part of San Mateo County's 2020 census outreach efforts with a focus on Asian community. So to me, the U.S. Census is like an American family portrait that's taken every 10 years. I think it's critical that Asian community can stand up and be part of that picture. According to the U.S. Census Bureau's 2019 estimate, over 30% of San Mateo County residents are Asian heritage, the largest ethnic group in San Mateo County. And the Chinese is the second most common non-English language spoken in San Mateo County, following by Tagalog and Hindi. So within the county, some of the cities have even larger Asian populations, such as Daly City, Millbrae, Foster City. Over half of their population are Asian heritage. I think what is really challenging and unique about San Mateo County is that among those Asian population, a large amount of them are new immigrants. So this is going to be their very first census experience. For me too, it's my first census experience. Sorry. So I mean, for them, it's totally a new concept to them. Like they never heard it before, they never have any experience with this before. And the biggest misconception to them is they think census is very similar to election, where you have to be a U.S. citizen to participate. But this is not true for census. Whether you are here with working visa, green card holders, no, tourist visa, student visa, or undocumented, we all count. I think now we are all working and living under this new normal. So we definitely have a lot of challenges. So we have been trying really hard to think creatively, like to still outreach to those hard to come populations. So we have been really trying to increase the social media presence in a more culturally and linguistically sensitive way. So we have launched the very first public WeChat account in San Mateo County. So WeChat is a social media platform that's widely used in Chinese community. So we have been sharing census information on WeChat since February. We have been very thoughtful and strategic about what messages we share, because we really try to tailor the census messaging to the specific group we are targeting for. For example, for green card holders, we want to say, even though you are not U.S. citizen, you are essential, you matter, and you count. Myself, I'm not a U.S. citizen, I'm a green card holder, but I live and work in San Mateo County. I go to libraries, I go to parks, I use public transportation. My daughter gonna go to public schools. All those services we rely on every single day are gonna be impacted by the 2020 census, and it will impact my family for the next 10 years. I think another challenge for the outreach work in Asian community is the distrust of the government and uncertainties about the future too. So President Trump last Monday just issued an executive order to temporarily suspend all working visas for the H-1B holders. I mean, the whole H-1B working community live in fear right now. And also, I mean, I think Asian community is so distracted by all those uncertainties, uncertainty about the immigration policy, about economy, about the pandemic. So I think what we can do to help them feel that census is safe and important to them. So we have been really trying hard to push out the message that there's no citizenship question on the census, and all the information confidential. And by law, it is not allowed to share to anyone, including ICE, IRS, or local law enforcement agencies, and everyone, regardless of your immigration status, everyone count. And for the concerns about the economy, I mean, the California's unemployment rate, I think last month is about 15.5%. So I think it's more important than ever right now to make sure we have an accurate and complete count so we can secure the fundings for the programs and services that is critical to our vulnerable communities. And also about the pandemic, I mean, what we can do to help to stop the spread of the virus, we have been continually saying this. We encourage self-response instead of having enumerators coming to your door in August to do this in-person follow-up, because sometimes it might not be easy to keep that 6 feet social distance. So I just want to say we are all in this together. I mean, it's a learning process for all of us, especially during this challenging time. And here at San Mateo County, we are committed to ensuring a complete and accurate count of all San Mateo County residents, regardless of your immigration status or background.
Thank you, Nina. I'm going to again summarize some of the questions because of our time constraints. There is a question from Hyundai News, which is the Korean community has traditionally been undercounted, largely because of language barriers, among other factors. But is your office doing anything specific to reach Korean residents of San Mateo County?
I think we are really trying hard to make sure every ethnic community have the equal access, but within the restrained budget available have for our team. So I think the top language spoken in our county are Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, Hindi. What's the other one? If remind me, Megan, if you know. So Korean is actually not one of them, but we are happy to actually continue our outreach work to all those nonprofits in Korean communities to really hope they can actually be our trusted messengers and get into the community, still have this sense of conversation going on with the Korean community for sure.
We have a question from Han Lee from World Journal. Since I missed him early on, Han Lee, ask your question.
Hi, Nina. I heard you just mention the WeChat account outreach strategy. I think that's pretty interesting because I'm an active user, and I think in the Asian community or Chinese immigrant community, that's a really popular app. So I was wondering, what's the exact information that you're putting on that platform, and also have you heard any feedback from the community that okay, this is useful, this is helpful, and that might have some insights for us to reach out to the community in the future? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, so we actually launched the WeChat account back in February. So far, we have about 450 followers, and some of the articles have like over 1,000 views. I think we do have really positive feedback from the community because we did a really small sample test. I think probably over 70% of the Chinese communities actually learn about census through the WeChat account. So it's really a widely used app people actually use to learn new information or learn what's going on in their community. So we have been sharing really we have been tailored like messages for the within the WeChat account messages. Like we have specific article targeting the H-1B working visa community. We have articles really targeting for the green card holders, or focus for, I think for San Mateo County, what's really unique, we have a lot of visitor visas too. Those grandparents fly all the way from Asian countries, come here to take care of their grandchildren. So they are actually on B1/B2 visitor visa. So we have been designing messages really targeting, micro-targeting each of those specific group, like immigration status. I think so far we have been doing well. We'll continue to be doing that too.
Okay. Unfortunately, we do have a few more questions. I'll try to get to them at the end of the conference, but we're going to go to our next speaker, Talavu Ayumavai, who is a leader in the San Mateo Pacific Island community and directs San Mateo County's Pacific Islanders Complete Count Committee. Vo, it's a great pleasure to have you on the call.
Talofa, good morning, everyone. Thank you as well, Sandy and Ethnic Media, for holding this forum. And thank you also to, and shout out to Megan and Melissa for putting this concerted effort together and galvanizing our county to being the #1 county in California. So thank you again, ladies, for your efforts. Greatly appreciated. And for the time constraint, I'm going to jump straight to our adjustments of efforts when COVID had hit. As Lisa mentioned, I'm sure all of us had a big groundwork and a lot of events that we were planning, but unfortunately, since COVID hit, we had to make adjustments. And going into that, it was a little bit scary because it was unknown territory of how we were going to go about with our outreach efforts. We had to go back to the thinking board and just draw out some ideas and throw out a few suggestions of how we can go about moving forward. One of our first ways that we agreed with our outreach going virtually was our phone banking efforts. We actually used voter PDI to pull data of registered voters that identify as Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander. We were able to do phone banking through 5 counties, not only ours. We called all registered voters that identified as NHPIs in San Mateo County, the counties of San Francisco, Santa Clara, Alameda, and Contra Costa, as we saw those other counties as counties with heavy populations of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders. And we didn't recognize or notice any other organizations that were doing outreach specifically to the Pacific Islander community here within the Bay Area. So we thought it was best that we at least did phone banking in 4 other counties on top of just San Mateo County. And then moving forward, we decided to shift our questionnaire assistance to a virtual setting. We have been doing that since middle of April up until now. We do get a few appointments scheduled, and we assist some of our community members to fill out their questionnaire assistance. Language support is provided in Fijian, Samoan, and Tongan. We're currently still working on getting other Pacific Islander languages as we are looking to continue holding times for our virtual questionnaire assistance centers. And then one of our biggest events that we started the last week of April, and we ran for 7 weeks, was our Voices of Oceania musical series. Because we as Pacific Islanders, we are not only, of course, people of Oceania and voyagers, we're also big storytellers. And it was important that we highlighted our community stories. And each session was a 1-hour session. We had a musical guest on, and then we also had guest speakers on for our sessions to discuss an open dialogue of the census and why it was important for our community to be counted. And one thing that we stressed a lot was, especially with the diaspora of the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders here in the mainland, quote unquote, the United States, we stressed that our ancestors had migrated here from our small islands to this great nation for a better opportunity for their families and their not only their children, their children's children, and so forth. So it was very imperative that we push that messaging, that we as a community must carry this mantle forward and ensure that the resources for our children moving forward is available for them. And the best way for that to happen is that we are counted, and that our voices are heard in the 2020 census and also moving forward. So of course, with our efforts slowly coming to a close, as we're quickly approaching October 31st, that'll be here like tomorrow in a blink of an eye, we are still planning to do civic engagement efforts around the census and educating our community moving forward. So then come 2030, we won't have to go through this education process again. I think that's one of our strategies moving forward and going into the next census in 2030.
Bo, could I ask you one question? And again, I'm drawing on several questions in the chat box. Is there a way that Pacific Islanders and Native Hawaiians can identify what nations and what islands they come from on the census? And how important is it to differentiate between Fijian, Tongan, Samoan, Native Hawaiian? The issues of self-identity that the census raises, how important are these for your outreach?
I think it's very crucial, especially with the importance of the disaggregation of the data, because of course, most of the time, even back in 2010, Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders didn't have our own checkbox. We were actually lumped together with the Asian community. So we made great progress with OMB 15 and having that be disaggregated. There are Asian Americans, and then there's also checkboxes for Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. There are a few islands that are separate that are actually listed, and one of them is Samoan, but unfortunately not all of them are. Of course, our hope is in the future with more disaggregated data that they would be able to specify more of our different nations in the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the work you're doing for all the neighboring counties. It's important for us to know that. Our next speaker is Rita Mancera, who's the Executive Director of Puente, a community-based organization serving Spanish-speaking residents primarily in the county's unincorporated communities. Given the high percentage or the high number of Spanish speakers in the county, Ms. Mancera, we're so glad to have you join the call.
Thank you. Good morning. As you said, I'm the executive director of Puente, but I need to give some context. Our organization is on the south coast of San Mateo, and it is about 50% Anglo, 50% Latino. And I think the challenges with our community have been since 2010, that it is a community that has wished and benefited from being in the shadows, also depending on the administration that is leading our country. And since 2016, everybody was really trying to stay off the radar as much as possible. So we went into census with all the hopes and all the expectations, but we knew it was going to be hard. And so our community is a hard to count one. We also have a geographical spread out for about 164 square miles. Is very big, and so it takes a long time to go one ranch and then more than an hour to go up to the ranch on the other end. And the biggest reason and the biggest, I think, information that we have been using to convince our community to participate in census, in addition to empowering them and all that, is that we are definitely undercounted. In 2010, you can find our community has 1,900 residents. And even though our community is small, we usually talk about 4 unincorporated towns. We know that just from the people that our community resource center serves, it's about that amount. It's about 1,600. And when we have done the math of people in the area, we estimate that there's between 5,000 and 6,000 people. So we're missing a lot of people. So in 2010, our response rate was 33%. Right now we are at 46.1%. And it was very hard to get there. Like every person answering the census in our area counts. Some of the challenges are, and probably the biggest one that I see, is that the forms themselves are not being mailed to PO boxes. And our community is rural. We all get our mail in PO boxes. There's a few people in the downtown area that actually get their mail delivered to their homes. And then, of course, we had an original plan. Part of the original plan, some of the strategies that have worked out for our community is definitely to have community promoters that were able to reach out directly at the homes of people and talk to them about census. We always have to do everything bilingual in our organizations. Our teachers are bilingual, our flyers are bilingual, our social media is bilingual. That takes more effort, but it is the only way to reach out to those members of the community that we want to reach out so that they can get counted. The other challenge is there's this trust, particularly if people come from other countries where they have been ignored, or they feel that their voice have not been heard and they don't count, or that even if they vote, they feel that they're not represented. All these experiences carry on when they come here too. And so some of the farm workers and I have conversations, and they really feel that it's better that they don't participate, that they are afraid that they are going to get their information to another department that should not have their information, or that the government is gonna do whatever and they're gonna continue ignoring them. So there's a lot of conversations on one-on-one that need to be happening. We had planned to get the community together on a large kickoff, which in the past has worked for many different projects. And so that was on April 1st. As you know, all this got canceled. And so we ended up actually making, someone mentioned, like going back to the board and figuring out what we were going to be doing to reach out to the family. So for better or for worse, in this particular case, COVID gave us an opportunity to meet people every week. We have a food distribution. There's about 200 households that come every Thursday. And we ended up getting, between the promoters and some of our staff and then volunteers, actually work with people on the car and answer the survey, on phones. We don't have good Wi-Fi, which is another challenge. So we tried iPads and it was not working. So then get your phones up, and that's what we use. And then the latest challenge was that our community, we were talking to everyone and giving them the messaging to answer the survey, even if we didn't have an ID number, because we were not getting our mail. And then 3 weeks ago or so, we started getting the forms actually in the doors, and people were very confused about whether they needed to answer the forms or if because they already answered it online, they were fine. And so a lot of messaging and a lot of updating information. And, there's a lot of informal communication. There's not one platform that works in my community. Some people are on Nextdoor, some people are on Facebook, some people are not in anything. Most people have a phone. So something that has worked for us also, we use this tool that is called Talking Points, that is mostly for schools to use and to communicate in different languages. So you send your message in English and the people have their phone set up for whatever language and they get it in that language. So that we started using as we couldn't be spending time in person with people. And we also instituted something that really, it was not part of our original plan, which was phone banking. And fortunately, we have some subgroups of databases about our community. So everyone that participated in the school supplies backpack drive from last year, there's about 250 kids that got school supplies. So we hired someone to just start calling all those families that participated in the program to target them to answer the census over the phone. And then we have another subgroup of people that participated in our English classes. So we started texting those folks. And so it's been really, I think, addressing the target very, very specifically with communities. Now, fortunately, now our community promoters are going out again. And so we had college students that in any other time that were going to be working in the summer saving for college, that right now they are available in the community and not easily hired. And we needed help to start going again door to door. So we actually hired 4 college students so that they can help us do the target information to the community. Okay. I think, go ahead.
This is such a great and very detailed presentation, but I have to hold you there. There are a number of questions I'm going to ask Ramon Cisneros. It's a question for everyone, but it I think is a very important question. Ramon.
Hello. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, there has been a lot of rumors in the community that if you don't answer the census online, somebody's gonna come to your house. So what they've been saying is you can just go ahead and put anything on it. And that way you will be protected from being visited. And that refers a lot to when you have more than one family living in the house, when you have the father, the mother, 2 kids, but there are 3 uncles and a cousin or something like that, which is very common in the community. And so the buzz around is that a lot of people are just going to fill up untruthfully the form. Do you have have you dealt with that? Thank you.
Great. Rita.
No, I have not seen actually in my community people that want to answer it or want to answer it with, you know, other information. For sure, what I've seen is that people ask me what will happen if they don't answer it or if they don't answer all the questions. And so we tell them that, you know, if they don't answer all the questions, try to answer as many as possible to avoid having an enumerator coming to their home. If they don't answer that many, that's going to trigger for a visit. And most people do not want that visit.
I think Megan Ghosh, you want to also address that question. Megan.
Thank you, Ramon, for that question. It brings up a point I meant to mention earlier, and that even though San Mateo County has a really high self-response rate, we don't know that everyone is being counted. So it's directly to your point that there has been a lot of concerns expressed about if you have multiple families living in a certain house that they don't want to report that. There's a fear it's going to go to landlords, you know, county code, all of that stuff. And so the only way we can combat this is with education, and that these responses are confidential. They are not being shared with county government, county code, law enforcement. And it's so important that everyone is counted, because the resources that everyone needs is only based on population. So it is a disservice to yourself to not report accurately who lives in the home. And we know there's fear, and that's why we've been trying to, you know, address that with our door hangers that talk about who the data can be shared with our trusted messengers, and how we push out the information. So it's a really good point, Ramon.
Okay, thank you. Now, thank you for being patient, Anita Reese. You are the Executive Director of the Pacifica Resource Center, and we're very happy to have you round out this terrific panel. There's been a surge, I learned from the county, in Pacifica, and you are surging way past your more affluent neighbor, Woodside. So I guess we want to end with you telling us, how did you do that?
Well, thank you so much for having me. So Pacifica Resource Center provides services and support to families and individuals in Pacifica who are struggling to make ends meet. And we've been providing those services in Pacifica since 1974. So we've got over 45 years of experience working in this particular community. And what we've learned is that residents are passionate and often divided on community issues. So some of our past and recent battles in Pacifica have included widening of Highway 1, investing in a new library, and rent stabilization. So a lot of those issues are of concern to folks in town. But my board president likes to say that Pacifica does agree on 2 things, and that's the whales and the Pacifica Resource Center. So we take advantage of that, and we've leveraged this trust and support with our census work. So despite our community differences, the census has become a common ground issue. Residents wanted their voices to be heard, and they saw the importance of everyone counting. And so as a result, we have seen an increase from 2010 to now in over 10%, but we still have more work to do. And so we are planning to continue our strategies of phone banking in the lower response areas of Pacifica, as well as the unincorporated areas south of Pacifica through El Granada. But we've really worked hard to just make sure folks recognize the importance. I think it was Megan who said, you know, it's about education. And so we started that education early in January, February, March, leading up to when it was time to do their census. And COVID threw, you know, for everybody, a wrench in the plans. And so things like door knocking were out, you know, were no longer possible. And we had to pivot to really try to incorporate other strategies. So a lot of our work has been through social media.
So you're essentially saying that having a very activated community, albeit a contentious community like Pacifica, work to your advantage. What is there a single message, a single phrase, a single theme or talking point that resonates with Pacifica, like Census and the whales. Or,
right. For us, I saw the most significant increase when we really focused on their voice being heard. And then second was, the competitive nature of our community. They wanted to be first. So they aren't quite first yet, but, they want to be first. So, hopefully between now and the end, we'll beat out San Carlos.
well, that's great. And thank you for being so short, because this allows us now to go, and I would like to ask our wonderful audience, our wonderful participants, to give us about 5 to 8 minutes after the hour so that we can have open-ended questions. And I want to start the questions with Amar Gupta. You can ask any of our panelists for a question. You can direct your question to any of our panelists. Mr. Gupta from Siliconeer.
Good morning, everybody. So my question is, how does your office target South Asians? What have you done to reach out to South Asians, Indian Americans? What kind of social media or any other practices are involved?
So I think that's a question for Nina Lee.
I think, so we all live in San Mateo County. I think everyone, so even though like I'm Chinese, so I use WeChat account a lot, but I still very active on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So all those popular social media platform using in the United States. So we have been sharing all those information, in language information about census on all across the board of all our social media platform, Twitter, Instagram, county Facebook, and also on the WeChat account too.
A follow-up question. So how come you've ignored all the local publications and outreach media for the community that's within the community itself?
Well, we have been doing interviews with Filipino news too. We're trying to actually take a proactive way to outreach to all those local ethnic medias as much as we can. But if there's any media like we are missing, please outreach to us. We're happy to do all the outreach work or interviews. I think you are the trusted messengers in your community. If you can help us spread the messages to your community, we would really appreciate that too.
Thank you.
Okay, Fernando Torres. You have a question, and we welcome your participation. Please ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Oh, no. Yeah. A little bit of static.
I
muted him. No. Fernando, I'm going to ask the question you asked on your chat box, just because of the static. Go right here. And I'm sure you have other questions because you always ask great questions. We are running against time. We need to increase the response rate. Are there plans for a conference or virtual meeting with other communities? And I think that's a question for Melissa. Melissa, do you want to address Fernando's question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So we had a big teletalk, we had a big event scheduled for April 1st, like many of our partners, but we switched our April 1st event to a teletown hall. And then we had another one on May 20th that was a Spanish census teletown hall. Rita, who's on this call, was one of our panelists. And we did that in collaboration with Santa Clara County, and the moderator was from Univision. So we have been doing these large teletown hall events that are also, people are also able to call in. So it's not only online, because we realize that not everyone has access to internet or broadband services. So we really wanted to make sure that when we do these large scale virtual or teletown hall events, that people can also call in, and we made sure to advertise that. And Thrive, who we are coordinating with, who coordinates a lot of our teams, they host regional meetings. So these regional meetings are done by location. So there's one for East Palo Alto, one for the coast. There's one for North County. There's several other regional meetings, and they're once a month. So you can always come by and then hear what everyone in that area is doing. And I believe Megan already mentioned this, but we do bi-weekly virtual meetings with all Bay Area counties. And we also work with the state and have been doing statewide calls as well for almost 2 years. And that is once a week as well. So we're really making sure, you know, we're sharing best practices with other Bay Area counties and other communities, you know, like, well, this is working for Los Angeles, or this is working for Alameda County, or we share that, you know, this really worked for San Mateo County, and we're all really sharing our toolkits, our social media, and it's really a collaborative effort among not only the county, but state, federal, regional. We're all hands on deck here, so.
Okay, thank you. I think we have one final comment that I'd like Jean Ho to make, because it really connects, once again, the impact of the pandemic, the impact of the economic downturn, the enormous momentum building around racial justice to the census. Jean, do you want to share your last observation with us?
Yeah, I just have a comment to make, because I am a Chinese media company with multimedia outlets. And what I'm finding nowadays is that the topic of COVID-19 and census are fighting for media attention. And I think that, you know, we can turn it around and make them actually help each other out. Because, you know, I like to remind my readers that these two occurrences are not exclusive from each other, but in fact, they're inclusive with each other. And I just want them to understand, remind them that it is so important to have the accurate census count in California. So in the next 10 years, if we have another pandemic, then we will get the sufficient funding from the federal government to help out California. And that can only be achieved when we have everybody counted. And that, I think, is so important, to have the two occurrences that seems to be fighting against each other to actually combine with each other.
Right. I think you have given us our final word on this subject. Thank you. I want to thank especially our speakers. We had over 60 people on this call. I think all of you, and Alyssa, you spoke to this about how much you speak to other counties. The problem is that those of us on the front lines, and by that I really mean ethnic media embedded in their communities, feel isolated. We become the targets of briefings with the assumption that we'll be able to amplify the messaging points, but we haven't really been engaged at the table in planning the outreach strategies, and we should be. We should be intimate partners, not simply channels for communication at the end point. I guess that's spoken here not as a moderator, but as an advocate. So I just want to say there's a tremendous interest in the story of San Mateo's success. It's a good news story at a time when you look hard for stories of good news, and you've inspired us. Each of you have given us ideas, and I'm most grateful to you and to our media for joining this call. The conference is now ended.